Doug Cosmo Clifford was the drummer and one part of the rhythm section for the legendary Creedence Clearwater Revival. Doug is a creative spirit, and after Creedence broke up in the early 70s, Doug put together a whole lot of music, collaborating with various musicians over the years, starting with his first solo album, Cosmo, in 1972, to his latest offering, For All the Money in the World, with Steve Wright of the Greg Kihn Band. The album, while released earlier this year, was written and recorded in the 1980s and follows up an earlier solo album, Magic Window, that came out in 2020. I enjoyed talking to Doug about the vision for the album, the production, and the dream team that worked on this album, which included the legendary guitar player Joe Satriani. Another key project that Doug was part of was Creedence Clearwater Revisited, a band that he put together with his old pal and bass player for Creedence Clearwater Revival, Stu Cook. We journeyed back in time and Doug reflected upon Creedence's musical legacy, music in the 60s, the early days of the band, playing at Woodstock, and a whole lot more. Despite being diagnosed with Parkinson's a few years ago, this fairly long conversation was filled with humor and insight.
Platinum records here.
I do, yeah.
We want to get those in there. That's people don't love that. I've got. Well, I don't know if you can see this or not, but got a room full of it.
Live music seems to be coming back, so I guess that's a good thing.
Yeah, yeah. I just talked to John McPhee from the Doobie Brothers yesterday. I sent him a copy of the CD we're talking about today, and he's an old friend. I've known him for 40 years, and they're just now getting started and kind of exciting. It's their 50th anniversary, but now it's the 51st. Everything's off a year now, but they're Michael McDonald will be touring with them, so pretty exciting.
Wow. Yeah, exciting times. Yeah. Talking about the new album, I've thoroughly enjoyed listening to it, For All the Money in the World.
Oh, cool.
Really nice. What is the story behind the album? Did you have sort of a musical vision for it when you were recording it? I know you recorded it. It was 30 years ago, right? Did you have a sort of musical vision for it back then?
Well, actually, no, it was a tool to try and get a record deal or to help to get a record deal. Things were a little different then. We had Steve Wright, first of all, Steve Wright from Greg Kihn Band, who co-wrote Jeopardy and some of their other more popular songs. And I became friends, and so we decided we would try to write some music together and see how it turned out. Well, it turned out that we had a really good, relaxed, no pressure way of writing music together. So we started doing that, and then all of a sudden I looked and we had, like several songs. I said, we better record them or we'll forget them. And when I record and produce something, even though it's a demo, to me there's no such thing as a demo, especially if it's something that you're a co-writer on. You want it to be presented in the best way possible to whoever is on the other side listening to it. So I go in with the idea of I'm going in to make a record, not a demo. And that's why the quality of it is good. It happened in a period of a couple of years in the mid '80s, and that's why I have all those guitar players. It's not just one session; it was many sessions, and then I took the best 11 songs and put it in an album form from my vault. But let me backtrack to where we were. So we decided we wanted to have a band, and we would be the key writers. And so we had. Fortunately, a friend of ours brought in Keith England, who's the singer on the project and a great singer, and and more than just hitting the notes and being, in key and sustaining and doing all those things. What I really enjoyed about Keith, first of all, he had a great attitude and always was ready to work. But he took each song, and I'm the lyricist, and so the song is crafted around a story that is told both musically and verbally. Uh, and he had a knack for taking a song and finding the true essence of that song.
Hmm.
It's like going deep into the heart of the song, and he did that on all the songs that we recorded whenever we did it. There are other recordings with this project, but we can only put 11 on an album
Yeah.
at a time. But he really showed me something that was, and he was only like 25 years old. He was the youngest member of the band, and we were looking for a guitar player. That's why I have all those guitar players, because they we recorded them and saw how they worked, and their ideas and their attitudes, and so we have four songs with Joe Satriani,
Yeah.
uh, Jimmy Lyon. He's probably on three, maybe four. Greg Douglas, of course, ended up being the guitar player at the end of it, when the idea of the project was going away. The other part about getting a deal back then is you send a tape in, and if they like it, then they have an A&R man who comes out, meets you, looks you in the eye, and you just talk about what your plan is, what your hopes are, what you expect from them, what they expect from you, and then they also you go you play gigs, and they come and see the band live, how they perform. It was a more thorough
Yeah.
uh, time back then, and Steve didn't want to go out and play in the clubs. He thought it was going backwards, and so it did, we didn't get a deal because we didn't take that step. And I said, "What's wrong with going out and playing? We can always get better, no matter how good we think we are,
Yeah.
uh, and besides that, I would love to go out and play with this band." And it created a kind of a wedge, sort of an ego type thing that I didn't expect it, and so took the tapes that we had recorded and put them in my vault. It's called Cosmo's Vault. Cosmo is my nickname, and
Yeah.
uh, this band here with these characters, uh, uh, Stu Cook, of course, from Creedence Clearwater Revival. This project, Creedence Clearwater Revisited, we just finished it a year and a half ago. It lasted 25 years, so you
Amazing.
never know.
Yeah. You know
But
what struck me when I was listening to the album, it gave me a great insight as to where your head was musically 30 years ago, right? I would have expected it to sound like Creedence Clearwater Revival, right? But it's a very different sound.
well,
Um,
I would say that that's probably because of Steve Wright. He's more from on the pop side, and it's rock and roll, but it's kind of pop rock, and I had already done the Creedence sound. I've been there and done that. Put that to bed, and I was really enjoying the challenge of writing from his perspective. When I write or co-write, I will only write with one other person. I won't I won't put 3 in the mix because it's just one too many cooks spoil the broth, and you find that people are trying to get in more lines written down than someone else because they think they're thinking about the split, and before you have a split, you have to have music, and it has to be good and it has to be finished, and but when it's one other person, they have something that I don't have, and I have something that they don't have. And Steve and I enjoyed writing from his side when he was going to be coming up with chords and things of that nature. And most of the time, I wrote the music to the verses. Most of the time, he would come up with the choruses, and everybody knows that in a song, pop music especially, the chorus is that part of the song that you do all those other things to get to, and just like For All the Money in the World, and most of the time choruses are repeated verbally, and that's how kind of a quick synopsis on how a song breaks down.
Mm-hmm.
But since I had a chorus and that I had to match, and a lot of times it was pretty good because it gave me an idea. For All the Money in the World was a no-brainer. That was probably the best song that we wrote in that group of songs there. He had the chorus, and when I heard the chorus, I said, "That's a hit." Now I've got to really come up with something good, because not that I don't always try to do that, but I mean I knew that it was a special, very special thing. So it was a love song, and so I wanted to make sure that it was a different type of love song. It wasn't. I didn't say love at first sight or She Broke My Heart, or all the different genres that you can write about love in music. But For All the Money in the World, you wouldn't trade this person for all the money in the world. And so when that happens, then you get a verbal idea, and I had to make it work so that it came out of the chorus, and then set it up to go back into the chorus, and to get get it capitalize on that chorus every time.
Mm-hmm.
So when you do that, you'll come up with written words. Then you have to take those written words and make them have changes and a melody to fit the song. So that's kind of how we wrote. A lot of times I would do a groove, a drum groove, and Steve would come in with his bass or his guitar and have an idea for that, or the opposite of that. Steve would have a bass line, and I'd come in and say, "Oh, I got a groove for that."
Mm-hmm.
And so we capitalized on each other's strong points, if you will.
Yeah.
And it was fun. It was exciting. When I got to finishing For All the Money in the World, I had the chorus was done, and I had to write the rest of it. Well, I would take it home. We'd have several ideas, and I'd take it to my multi-track machine and put the idea down and write different ideas to go against it, and see how you go down the tracks. This one sounds good, or even break it up. This I like half of this, and I like half of the next one, and I'll see if I can put these two together. So
Yeah.
it's writing songs is really fun that way, and when you have different ideas, you play things that fit that idea. I'd already none of the Creedence approach would not have made sense with the songs that we wrote.
Yeah, but as a drummer, Doug, when you had to come up, what was your process of capturing ideas? Do you play piano, or do you play guitar? Is that how an idea starts for you, or does it start, just on the drums?
Well, if I'm co-writing, uh, if I'm not co-writing,
Yeah.
then I use the piano. Most of the time, I don't, and it's kind of odd, but I don't go from the drum groove to something else. I'm not a piano player. Make no mistake about that. But I'm a hunt and pecker. I use it for to be able to come up with chords and the melodic side, not the percussive side. So I come in that way when I'm writing by myself. I have a solo album called Magic Window,
Mhm.
and there are 3 songs on Magic Window that I wrote by myself. I didn't co-write. I like, as I say, I like to co-write because somebody has ideas or certain talents on one side that I don't have, and I have certain talents
Yeah.
that they don't have. And I like to do it that way because I can go we can try a bunch of ideas, and within an hour I might have 4 or 5 ideas. Just if nothing else, try and get a chorus some way. And sometimes I would come in with a chorus as well, especially in Magic Window. I was more proactive in working that part because I wrote 3 songs without anybody else.
Mhm.
I was kind of in that groove, so I was throwing ideas out to the other guys mainly to get music, solo ideas. In other words, I came up with a song that had a chorus and a verse, and so the idea of bringing in the fellow that I write with, uh, Robbie Polomsky, always has little guitar hooks, and that's critical too. You need that especially in pop music.
Mhm.
You need that music little hit, that comes around, sets up the chorus, or comes out of the chorus, and it's something that threads throughout the song, but it's immediately recognizable for the listener, and it's the thing that they can't wait till it comes back around,
Yeah.
and that's you know
Yeah. Magic Window came out in 2020, right? It came out last year.
right when the pandemic hit. Right,
And you sang on that album as well, didn't you?
big pardon?
Did you sing? You did vocals on that album as well,
Yes,
right?
I did.
So,
There were only 3 guys that made that record. It was, of course, me as a singer-songwriter, Russell DeShiel, who played lead guitar and was the engineer, and I've since made him co-producer with me on it. Uh, he's got really good technical skills. I have all but none, and I'm not a technical guy, but I can communicate what I want, uh, and really easily with Russell. He's a very smart guy. He has we use a lot of Pro Tools because we didn't have multi-tracks on any of these things, including for all the money in the world, the album. That those were finished masters, and so it doesn't give you a lot of room. They didn't have Pro Tools back when they were recorded, but Pro Tools is really a pretty
yeah.
cool thing, and it can be used. And it's, for example, we use it for certain effects, certain echoes. We used it for certain frequencies. And for example, we got to get the snare drum. It's buried. We got to get that up. and so you work your way around it until you find the frequency that it's in, and then you boost it to get it to be louder in the mix. The downside and the hard part of all of it is that there are other things in there that are in the same frequency that you may not want to come up. So, there is when I hand off the ball to Russell.
Mm-hmm.
He'll figure out a way to get what I need. So he's my co-producer. Plus, he's a smart guy. He's a very talented musician, and for all the money, I made him executive producer because he didn't play on it and didn't engineer it. So, but he's helping out, with not only the Pro Tools part of it, but we talk about things, we listen to things, and bounce ideas off each other, and I trust him, and I respect his judgment. So he's executive producer on this one, and co-producer on Magic Window.
What was it like recording with three guitar players, Doug? I'm guessing I'm guessing they weren't in the studio at the same time, right? They were.
That's a good guess. Yeah, that would be a recipe for disaster on many levels. But I probably did 10 sessions over time, maybe even more than that, in different studios. And like the first group of recordings, I had a studio that had an 8-track setup. It was very reasonably priced. So, and everybody said, "Oh, it's great." It was out in the country and had just a nice vibe to it. And Creedence's first album was done on 8 tracks, so I knew what to expect. And but I wanted to keep a sound from all of them, all the different places, that would make it sound like it was done in one session. Mm-hmm. I wanted to have I didn't want it to sound like a bunch of songs that were just done without caring for it. I wanted it to be able to be for the listener, like listening to an album. In other words, especially when you're doing it for a record company, you have guys that are professionals that are paying close attention. I was able to do that, and I had different engineers and different rooms, different equipment, but just taking an little extra time, not worrying about what it might cost. But to me, it was very valuable to have it turn out the way it did.
Mm-hmm.
The 3 guitar players they're just pedigree guys. They're so good, and it's fun to have, and that I had to kind of try and keep. I wanted them to be free to come up with ideas and play what they're sort of famous for, on one hand, but on the other hand, I had to kind of said, "No, you're the lead guitar, but this is not a guitar record. You have to support the singer, and let's go through the songs quickly." So we don't lose a train of thought that we might get, and we can.
Yeah.
And we did that, and with Joe, he was really in a different zone. I had to really talk about being a support guy, and this is before he was famous. So I was able to to get him to do this. But when the session was over, He had a smile on his face. He liked what he did. He said, I learned something today. And I said, I said, that is cool. That's a guy that, you know, thank you very much. And the way it turned out, it was very supportive. And I said, when the solo comes, you know, you can tip your hat back a little bit, you know, that's okay. But at the same time, remember that, you know, these are simple songs, and some of them we were on the edge of, you know, but that's cool. It's rock and roll, and you want to be on the edge. But
Yeah.
I was so fortunate to have those guys, different guys in there and playing, and it was funny because uh, on one hand, there was a similarity that they had, and on the other hand, there was their own thing. And I can say, oh, that's Jimmy, or you know, that's Greg there, and or Joe. So and we were. It was Joe was not there just as a guy doing an overdub session. We were it was an audition as well to be in the band, and after it was all done, I was happy with you know that he paid attention, and he played really no ego, just he just did as I asked, and I said, and you know, kind of go in this direction. Every hole doesn't have to be filled. Sometimes you know that in itself can be a lick, and other times you know try to always support the melody. That's one of the things I've learned in making records. Try to keep that melody as your guideline.
Hmm. This was, for those that don't know, this was before I think Joe Satriani put out Surfing with the Alien and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Well, I didn't finish what I was going to tell you about that. Sometimes I get going, and you know,
That's
but
okay.
that's just me. I asked him if he wanted to join the band. He says, "No, I'm going to do an instrumental heavy metal album." And everybody in the room looked at it and said, "Good luck with that, buddy."
And look how that turned out, right?
Well, let me tell you one thing that I do know well. The last laugh is always the best laugh, and he really got us on that one.
Yeah, I can imagine. But, Doug, you have a huge musical legacy, right, with Creedence and all of that. How do you look back at your solo career? Your first album, I think, came out in 72, was it?
Yeah,
So, how do you look
that
back when you listen to what there is today, which is like a new old album, and then there was your solo album that you put out in 72, Cosmo? How do you look back at it?
well, the first album was really not intended to be a work of art. Stu and I had an idea to turn Cosmos Factory. We had the lease on this, a long lease. The band had broken up, but we still had this lease, this contract. We're paying a rent, a monthly rent, and we said, "Well, we've got this space, but what are we going to do with it?" And so we wanted to have a remote truck that could go out and do live recordings with having you have a snake, you know, a 20 some odd foot snake. Uh, that's a big cord that comes into a junction box that has inputs for microphones. And there were none of those in Northern California, a bunch of them down in LA. So we had an idea. I was still under contract with Fantasy, and so I said, "Well, I'm going to do an album, and we'll test it out. We'll rent one of those trucks. We'll get it up here, see if we could, because we we had a rehearsal space in there. We never recorded at Cosmo's factory, but we had a rehearsal space, not there weren't solid walls. There were velvet curtains, good, and a wall-to-wall rug. It had a nice sound in there, and we wanted to see if that would be something that we could use as our studio, and use the truck. And so I wrote some songs and told Fantasy I'm going to do this album and I need a budget, and so they gave me a budget. And then it was, I didn't practice vocals. It was never intended to be, as I say, a work of art. But in testing it, I got people that I always wanted to play with. I always wanted to play with the horn section, so I got the Tower guys. In fact, I just talked to Dave Garibaldi earlier in the week, and then Donald Duck Dunn was a friend, had become a friend, and I always wanted to work with him, and Stu always wanted to play rhythm guitar on an album, so that excuse me, worked out. And so I just sang. I didn't practice my vocals, and it was, and of course Fantasy wanted to put it out. I didn't care if they put it out or not. It was, as I say, it was an experiment, and so they put it out. It didn't do anything, and I was always. Stu always told me that he liked my vocals on that record, and I just said, "Oh man, I don't know, I don't think so." And but anyway, it is what it is. So when I decided to do Magic Window, it was after the Steve Wright thing wasn't going to happen. I said, well, maybe I can make a deal as a singer-songwriter. Mm-hmm. I can put a band together that'll we'll go out and we'll play, and so I recorded that one. But what I did do before we started rolling, I started practicing on my vocals. Big difference in the singing.
The trend though today, Doug, seems to be to put out singles periodically, right? That seems to be the trend, to keep putting out singles and to be top of mind with people, with your audience on these streaming services. I want to compare it to what Creedence did in '69, putting out 3 albums in a year. And I did read somewhere with John saying that was because we always wanted to be on the radio, and we wanted to be on the radio through the year. So there's a similarity in the way it worked then and the way it works now. Do you agree with that?
Well, actually, John said, I asked him when we were in we did 3 albums in '69 and 5 hours in a 2-year period. That's a lot of work. And we would put singles out. We would record a single that would on an upcoming album, and that back then that was a big no-no. But and John said, if we're ever off the charts, we'll be forgotten. Now, that everybody else, every other band that was making records back then was off the charts at some point or another. Nobody was ever always on the charts except us. We were always on the charts. And I call us the Roman candle of rock and roll. We just, and it was, we kind of shot our wad there. But that's how we did it, and we certainly sold a lot of records, and so for whether you think it was the right thing to do or not, and we toured behind every album too, so we worked really hard, and when we went into the studio, we didn't go in with 15 songs and pick the best 10. We figured out what the album was going to be. And then we rehearsed for I don't know, a month or so, that album, each song, and until it was the way we wanted it. And so when we went into to record, we first take we had the songs because we couldn't wait to get those out of the way and start something new. We rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed. And it starts to get, you don't want it to lose your edge either. Oh, brother, here we go again on this one. Uh, but for the most part, it was fun because the songs were good. John was an excellent songwriter,
Hmm.
and I think one of the best vocalists uh, of his time. Time has taken, whatever toll it takes on guys that sing like he does, and not too many do sing like he did. It takes a toll, but man, it sure sounded good.
Oh, yes, it did. Doug, in comparison, I was reading Jimi Hendrix put out only 3 albums in 2 years. And I think the fourth was a live one. So, in comparison, you guys did so much in those 2 years, 3 years.
Yeah, we did. I mean, probably 2/3 of our, well, I don't know what the math would be, but a lot of the total songs that were recorded. Uh, and another thing that we did, and it wasn't something that we tried to do. We would put a single out and put a B side on it, and pretty soon we've got two A sides. So, and so that you had that the time that you would have for two albums, you only have half that time now. So that put a a speed on things that was twice what we
Yeah.
thought it would be, and the legacy, everybody knows about the legacy of the band's, uh, uh, shall we say, uh, problems with brothers and not having a real manager and all those other things and things that we were accused of that we didn't do and all of the negative. But somehow, some way, through all of that muck, we came out with this magical uh, uh, legacy of music, and that's what's important. That's what really counts. It doesn't matter whether we like each other or don't. I'm way past any of all that. I heard something very interesting uh, from the other day. Uh, so, a lifetime grudge is giving the person you have the grudge with uh, to be able to live free in your head, and
Yeah.
not not worth it. Life's pretty short. I have Parkinson's. I it's starting to do. It's moving on at a pretty slow pace, which is good. I
Hmm.
was diagnosed with it 15 years ago,
Hmm.
and the last 4 years or so, it's starting to actually uh, manifest itself. So I knew that what I had to do. I had to learn shake, rattle, and roll.
You know,
Always set your sense of humor about all of this crap.
yeah, I know. I wanted to briefly touch upon, Saul Zaentz, who produced the first Creedence album. What was the role he played in influencing the sound of the band?
Well, he had nothing to do with it. He
Okay.
did he did that because it was a new company. He had a hot band, and he wanted it was an ego thing for him, and also at the same time a business move that he made. He didn't come to the sessions. he, we had always produced it. John
Mm-hmm.
taking the helm on that. Uh, Saul did not physically uh, or mentally produce it. He sure liked what he got from us, but he had nothing to do with the creative side of it.
Mm-hmm. Because that was not the sound of that era, was it? So I was always curious to understand where the sound came from, because typically producers play a part in helping a band find their artistic voice and their sound. So I was just wondering whether Saul had a part to play in the sound of the band.
No, he did it so the industry would say, "Oh, look at this, Saul Zaentz, you got a good thing going." It was strictly an ego thing. It had nothing to do with the art
Yeah,
of it.
yeah.
And
The other thing I found out was obviously one of the biggest music festivals ever, that Creedence was the first band that was signed at for Woodstock, and I think you were paid $10,000. Was it back in '69?
yeah, I that's an interesting story. Now, you want to rewrite history, change history? No Woodstock. How about that? And it came very close to that. And why do I say that? Because all the big acts were on the sideline. They're all sitting and they're all looking in and waiting. And here's the thing with the Woodstock people, who the idea was cool, but they didn't have the experience. They had done a couple of little concerts, but I think they were hoping to have 50,000. I'm not really sure. I can't. I'm not. Don't quote me on that one, but I know they weren't planning on having 500,000. That was the last thing from their mind. But they had the idea. It sounded really cool, but no real experience at that level. So we said, okay, we'll do it. The second we said okay, all the other big boys, the Who and blah blah blah, and Jimi Hendrix and all the big acts came in. Now, what happens if we said, you guys have a good idea, but you just don't have the experience to do it, so we'll pass? I don't think there would have been a Woodstock. I do not think there
Incredible.
would have been a Woodstock.
Incredible. But do you have good memories of that set? I know there was the whole thing with the Grateful Dead and all that, but
Well, I do have good memories from that. I mean, it was very, very hectic. I don't know how our guys got our equipment in. To this day, I don't know how they did it. Good guys, smart guys, but I don't know how they did it, and that's okay. I didn't have to know, except that it was there. Then we had trouble with the rain, and that caused some of the delays as well. The Grateful Dead, and that was kind of the last straw, because they were whacked out, and we were a straight band. We never had even a beer until after the show was over and work was done. We got high on the music, and that was our whole thing, and so just all these things. But what I do remember, and Stu kind of nailed this one, that's Stu Cook, of course, for your listeners, from Creedence Clearwater Revival. This guy right here.
yeah.
Yeah, that's me. I was wearing glasses then. But anyway, he said it wasn't really about the bands. It was about the audience. And they took the worst weather conditions. It was rainy, wet, muddy. And then, of course, they had planned to have maybe 50,000 people. So now you have 10 times that amount. So you're very short on food, very short on potable water, really short on toilets. I mean, all the things, not just comforts, but basic needs that people need to have. Plus, all of these people just crammed in there, and they shared what they had, what little they had, with complete strangers. They were playing in the mud. People were laughing and smiling. They weren't going, "Oh, this is I'm too cold." We ought to burn the stage down, which happened in the 25th anniversary of it. It'll never happen again. People, the idea these guys had came true. Under the worst of conditions, peace, love, and music. And that's what happened.
Yeah.
That's what I remember, and want to take with me, how the humanness of it all, and it'll never happen again. And
Yeah.
somebody said something to me recently that if it would have been beer that they had instead of weed, there would have been violence, and it wouldn't have been so good. I believe that to be true.
Yeah, yeah. I also read that Jimi Hendrix, I think, went on at 9 in the morning. So I think Hendrix had possibly the worst slot of the lot.
I didn't know that. Poor Jimmy. Oh wow.
Yeah, and there weren't too. Well, I think there weren't too many people awake when he was playing Star Spangled Banner.
Yeah, yeah, you're probably right. Well,
Yeah.
and this, uh, John's fought it all the way up till just a few years ago. Now he's embraced Woodstock, even saying that he wrote "We'll Stop the Rain" after Woodstock. And for years, he said that it was about the rain, not RANIIN, but the reign of the Richard Nixon presidency. And so complete about face on that. He's changed and embraced it. He even has a painted up Volkswagen. So he's kind of, he came around on that one. I'll give him credit for that.
Yeah. Listening to your lyrics, listening to Creedence back in the day when I was growing up, I always thought that the band was from the Deep South. I didn't realize that you were from California.
You and everybody else. Uh, well, it was, that was the music that we listened to, and a lot of it had to do with radio in the Bay Area. San Francisco Bay Area was a melting pot. Uh, and during World War II, there's a huge shipyard in Richmond, California. And of course, ships from the war came in and were repaired, and new ones I don't know if they built new ones or not, but anyway, a lot of repair from battle. And the workforce came from all over the place, and a lot of them, a big part of them came from the South. And when they came from the South, they brought their music with them, and so there was enough of them to support radio stations. So we had the R&B station. I listened to that a lot, and then the country station. That was not like the country music today, which is kind of sloppy pop. It was real country, real country. Bob Wills and folks like that, and Buck Owens, and but I don't know if Buck would have been there at that point, but I mean that kind of country, to me, authentic country, as unspoiled, coming from the South. And so that really gave us an opportunity that most other places, big metropolitan areas, didn't have.
Hmm.
So that really helped, and we liked it. We liked what was happening, and those two music genres became rock and roll, urban and rural blues. Boom, there's your rock and roll. So we were there on the ground floor. We liked it, and we weren't going to play something because it was a fad or popular.
Hmm.
Our record company was owned by Beatniks. They're the Weiss brothers. Fantasy was a jazz label, and they had terrific jazz. I mean, that probably the best around. And then, of course, when these guys would have a successful jazz album on Fantasy, then they'd go to Columbia or someplace else. Fantasy was like the farm team for jazz, and but they knew that money was, if you want to make money in the record business, you have to have rock and roll. And so that's when we went and got signed. And but they kept saying, you have to have a gimmick. No, we don't. How about a hit? We did a lot of recording as the Gollywogs. And of course, that's the gimmick that they threw on us. We hated it. I'm looking over on my studio wall with pictures of us over there, the humility of it. And the uniforms they put, it was horrible. And we finally got past that and dumped him, and the rest, they say, is history.
Was that just because they were a label that worked predominantly with jazz bands, that they didn't kind of know how to handle a rock and roll band? Was that because of that?
They didn't it's
didn't
music that
understand
they didn't really like. And so they were playing an obvious economic game with it, hoping to have a successful. They got lucky. I mean, they really got lucky, and but they knew that rock and roll made big money compared to what Cal Tjader album might make, or something like that. I loved Cal Tjader.
What was your approach to playing covers, Doug? Creedence's first big hit, Susie Q, was a cover, right? Was it a Dale Hawkins cover?
Right. Well, part of it is the amount of product that we put out. John couldn't write quality songs to fill up a record. So they had to have quality songs that we played in the bars, years before, and so that's really basically why. And John, of course, said it's a tip of the hat from us to people that we liked, that influenced
growing up,
we were doing. So it made sense. I mean, if you're going to put out 5 albums in 2 years, you can't write that quality music for that. Don't get me wrong, the stuff that he wrote was, for the most part, was quality. That's why we had double-sided hit singles and on and on and on. But at the same time, you couldn't write enough songs to have 5 albums worth of material that was all good enough to be out on a record.
Yeah. But tell me, Doug, the 4 of you last played together, was it at Tom Fogerty's wedding in 1980, was it?
No, I think we played at our high school reunion. And I don't know if that was before Tom's wedding or after Tom's wedding, but Tom wasn't there, so because he wasn't in our class. He was older than we were. So I guess in terms of the actual 4 members, you would be correct. It was at Tom's wedding.
Do you have good memories of that?
I have good memories for Tom getting married. It was a little strained. John, you knew that he didn't want to be there doing that. I felt it anyway. But I think we always played longer than on those few occasions, longer than he said we would play. For example, when we played at our high school reunion, he said, we're going to do 3 songs, and he named 2 songs, and he says, by the time we get up there and get going, I'll figure out what the last song is going to be. We played for an hour and a half.
Amazing. I was listening to I've been listening to a lot of Creedence the last few weeks, and I realize there's no bad album, there's no bad song. I mean, you guys, I think, would have easily been the biggest band in the world at that point. I think just
Well,
because there was no weak songs in that sense in the Creedence catalog.
yeah, that's true, and we were. In 69 and 70, we were the number one in the world in record sales, and we were the number one concert draw. That's why the Woodstock thing. We were the number one concert draw, uh, and all these other guys are sitting on the fence. They're not, they're not quite believers in the idea these the guys had. So
Yeah.
yeah, we were number one in the world, and pretty cool.
Yeah. How does that make you feel today, Doug? That if you look at the legacy that you have, I mean, across generations, people listen to your music, continue to listen to your music across the world. How does that make you feel?
Oh, I mean, there's it's almost indescribable. And to me, our greatest achievement is in pop. Time is the test of time is critical, and we have three generations, and I see a fourth emerging. I call that generation single digiters, 7, 8, 9 year olds, single digits. And then we go into double digits, 10, 11, and then 12, up through that generation. And we saw that a lot when we were in this band, Stu and I, Creedence Clearwater Revisited. We would see uh, three generations, and they were engaged in the music. They were singing the words. I don't know all the words to all the songs. I know that might sound crazy to you, but there's certain songs uh, never really uh, got the the same, or there were parts that were critical at certain times. But anyway, I guess if somebody had a gun and put it to my head and said sing the songs, I probably could. But my point is, here are these kids that are, you know, young, and to me, I have a 52-year-old son, so their kids, my kid range is pretty deep, but three generations, and grow and still growing. We get a lot of radio play,
Yeah.
and I'm hoping to get a radio play with my album, and say, you guys did it for Creedence, and without radio, I wouldn't be talking to you right now. And radio embraces. I'll give you a radio story that I think you'll enjoy. Back in the time that we were releasing Susie Q, and there were song pickers, they called them, and these guys they were real good, had great ears at picking songs that were going to be successful. How they did it, I don't know. But there was a fellow named Bill Drake who had and they called them sheets. They would sell their sheets. And a lot of times the secondary markets, everybody bought them in the secondary markets, all the radio stations, because, they were taking a bigger chance than the big ones. The big ones would see what was happening in the secondary markets, and the ones that were doing well, they would add. But they would still get to buy these sheets, because these guys had an extra special ear. They didn't want to miss anything.
Mhm.
And so he's the one, Bill Drake said Susie Q is a hit. And without Bill Drake saying it's a hit, I wouldn't be talking to you right now. And so that was, it did its thing. And then we put out, Put a Spell on You, and that died at 53 on the charts. And so we knew our next album had to have an original single or we were going to be a one-hit wonder.
Mm-hmm.
And so we thought Born on the Bayou would song. That's still my favorite Creedence song. It's a quarter note thing. That's what I did on Suzuki. I changed the rockabilly thing to a quarter note thing in the bars because the quarter, be honest with you, the original Suzuki, I never really liked it. I just thought it was corny and no, that's not a knock on Dale Hawkins, but it wasn't one of my favorite songs. Let's put it that way. And so when you're playing 5 sets a night, 6 nights a week, you got to stretch your material out, and you want to have something that's danceable. So I changed the beat to a quarter note beat, and then the eighth note in between the quarter notes is I played on the bass drum. So it goes boom ba boom boom ba boom boom ba boom 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 ba boom. It sounds like a train. And what it did, besides the beat part is obvious, that pounding people on the chest, but it also opened up the guitars. If you listen next time you listen to Susan Q, see that how the guitars sound. It creates this huge, less is best sound. It really just powers the guitars, and that's a lot of drummers know that the certain grooves will move certain instruments, and when you're a guitar band, you're moving the guitars, and beer and economics in a bar is selling beer, and you sell beer when people dance because they get hot and sweaty. And they loved that because it was a 10-minute song, and that filled up the space of 3 songs. And so it was a winner all the way. That group beat. I'm convinced that beat made that Suzy Q. If we had done it, the way it was originally done, I don't think so. I don't think it would have happened. But yeah, it's.
Fantastic. That's an amazing story. Do you still listen to music today, Doug? Are there bands of today?
Let me finish. I got carried away. So the second song comes out in Bayou Country. It's a turntable hit. We got airplay, but it wasn't selling. And the way you go up the charts, is you get airplay, but it sells. And when people are buying it, then that gives credence to it. It goes up the charts. So Bill Drake put out on his tip sheet, and he says, "You've got the right record, just turn it over." And Proud Mary was on the other side.
That's it for this week's episode of Tales from the Road. Tales from the Road is brought to you by the concert photographer and Moving Pictures Media. Don't forget to join us next week for another episode. If you like what you heard, subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or Google Play. Thank you for listening.